We all know freedom isn't free. It's time to honor those who have served our country. Education Today starts now.
Welcome to Education Today. I'm John Zisch with the Armstrong School District. Today we're reflecting on the sacrifices that veterans have made for our nation. To help us understand more about this, we have Colonel James Nemec, a local dentist who also serves as a Katanning Senior High School football line coach. But I'm sure he will tell you that one of his proudest roles is he is a 24-year veteran of the United States Army, having recently come out of Army retirement to serve 110 days of active duty. Colonel Nemec, I'd like to welcome you to the show, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Would you please tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a graduate of Gateway High School. I come from Monroeville, Wilmerding area, and went to the University of Toledo undergraduate, went into the Army through ROTC, Reserve Officer Training School, commissioning, and served, and then got out of the Army, went back to dental school on an Army program at the University of Pittsburgh, graduated, and then went back into the Army. And when I retired in 1995, we came to Armstrong County to call it home.
Excellent. Well, I'm amazed that you found time to be here given your busy dentist schedule. And I was wondering, why did you think it was so important to come and talk about veterans today?
Probably the greatest people to me in our society are the veterans and their families, without a doubt. There is nobody to match them, and I'm not minimizing the accomplishments of anybody else, but we have our freedoms, we have our country, we have our safety because of the sacrifices and the hardships that veterans and their families have endured. So if I can take an opportunity to represent them or salute them, I will do it at any time, any place.
Sure.
Thank you.
And represent them well. I asked you to be in uniform today, and I really appreciate it. And wow, it's just impressive just to see, all that's gone into your uniform. And I was wondering, would you take a moment and explain the various elements of your uniform?
Well, on my lapel, you have the U.S., of course, and everybody knows what that represents. The officers wear that on their lapel. And then I have the Dental Corps Caduceus, which is a signature of the Army Medical Department and specifically the dental specialty. My rank is worn on my shoulder, and on this side of the uniform, there's a Army Medical Regiment crest. I can wear that even in retirement because I was a charter member of the Army Medical Regiment. And then the awards and ribbons are worn on the other side of the uniform. And to me, each one of those awards and ribbons have a significance because, John, they represent many, many Department of Army civilians and service members who worked with me and that I served with. And I remember all those people and their contributions to America. That's why I wear those ribbons proudly, because of what they helped me accomplish and what they accomplished.
Sure. Now you're a local dentist and you also have a dental insignia on your lapel. Does that mean basically one of your functions in the Army was to help out in the dental arena?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We have, the Army Medical Department has physicians, dentists, optometrists, and all medical specialties. In fact, a local service member who is serving at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, Lieutenant Ben Bauer, is an Army medical specialist. He's a physical therapist. And they have their own, some of them are civilians, but most of them are uniformed members.
Okay. Yes, it definitely takes all types to make the Army and all of our armed forces work well, I'm sure. Another thing I was curious about was we mentioned that you recently returned from 110 days of active duty. And I was wondering why you decided to come out of retirement, basically, to do these 110 days of active duty. Would you kind of take us back to why you did that?
September 11th changed all of our lives significantly, and I think my personal take on that, and I hope that every American feels that way, is to never forget September 11th and forget what happened, the threat to our security, the devastation of people that got up and went to work and were killed by a very, very bad enemy, an enemy that we have to take on and we have to combat. As a retired officer, I felt compelled, and I called the Army Medical Department. I called down to the Surgeon General's office and volunteered to come out of retirement. And I waited and waited and waited, and when I told people that, they kind of thought I was nuts, I suppose, but then the call came, and I took what I could. I wanted to go to Afghanistan or Iraq, but they didn't send me. They sent me to Fort Bragg, which was fine. And you asked me what I did in the service, and what I do is take care of soldiers. That's what you do. You treat them, and you have other functions, because an Army officer just doesn't do their primary specialty. Like an infantry officer, they do infantry tactics, but they also have command, they have staff positions, and education, etc. I taught while I was in the service. While I was doing clinical dentistry, I taught for 2 years at the Academy of Health Sciences. So there are various activities that go on, not just patient care, for the Army Medical Department.
Excellent. Now, I know that your family also continues a tradition of service to country. And I was wondering if you would please elaborate a little bit about that, and also tell us why you think that's so important, that concept of serving your country.
Well, sir, both daughters have served. Allison rose to the position of a lieutenant junior grade in the Coast Guard. She's a United States Coast Guard Academy graduate. And my daughter Kate, military police officer, rose to the rank of captain, and both of them decided to be mothers and to get out of the service, and they were both in Western Pennsylvania with the grandkids. So my wife's real happy about that, and so am I. My two sons, Lou is a captain now. He's at Fort Lewis, Washington. He's been to Afghanistan and Iraq. And Jimmy Mack's a lieutenant. He's running a gun platoon in Iraq right now as we speak. Why do I think it's important? I think everybody should serve the nation in some capacity. I think it's very important to do that. Freedom isn't free, and you have to pay a price. And for my family to pay a price, I think it's expected. I think my children were reared that service to country is what should be done. Certainly, if we learn no other lesson from these veterans on Veterans Day, think back of what they've given you as an individual and think how you can better serve the country, because I think service to country is what makes America great.
Excellent. And are there more than one way? Is there more than one way, perhaps, to serve the country?
Well, my one son-in-law is a police officer, and
there you go.
My other son-in-law is a teacher, and I think that is service to country. I think taking care of the young men and young women in our society and teaching them about America and what's good and proper is an excellent profession. From firemen to just significant volunteerism. Anytime you're around in June and you go up to the Ford City Relay for Life, you see a tremendous amount of people who are interested in serving our society. So yes, the veterans aren't the only ones. They're just special in my heart.
That's true. Well, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with Education Today and Colonel Nemec to talk about support for the global war on terrorism. We'll be right back after this. And we're back with Education Today from the Armstrong School District. Our guest is Colonel James Nemec, Army veteran, and we're going to talk about support for the global war on terrorism. Colonel Nemec, I was wondering if you've ever heard the statements, "I support the troops, but I don't support the war." From your perspective, how do you take that?
That's a good question. The reason it's a good question to me is because I think it's a complete contradiction. You can't support the troops and say you support the troops and not support the war. These young men and young women are laying their life and limb on the line every day. Their families live in a position where they don't know. They try to get an email, they try to get a phone call, and they're out there knowing that they're in harm's way, trying to establish freedom, trying to fight this terrible enemy. And for somebody to say, I don't support the war, but I support the troops, or I don't support what they're doing. Soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines don't want to hear that, because they're dedicated to a mission. They don't just get up in the morning and say, well, I guess I'm going to go down and protect people in Baghdad. They get down there with fire in their eyes and try to accomplish what they need to do. Just like the elections. I got a note from my son, and he was very enthused about the elections. The first elections that Iraq had, that morning, I received several phone calls from Fort Bragg just saying and just proclaiming how proud they were. One of the best stories I have regarding this is a young 21-year-old soldier when they had elections in Afghanistan, and he was my patient. And he came in that day and he said, sir, aren't you enthused about about what's going on? And I said, oh, I guess I am. I couldn't figure out what he was talking about. But what it came down to is he was so enthused that he, as a 21-year-old soldier, impacted on the lives of the Afghan people, that they were going to have elections, and he had an impact. He said, never in my life again will I be able to accomplish something like that, sir. He said, I saw those women over there who couldn't read. I saw what they lived in, and now they're going to have some freedom. And he said, and we're going to do it in Iraq. These soldiers believe. They believe in what they're doing.
That's not only service to country, to me that's service to the world and just
yes, it is.
People throughout the world.
So. And when they believe, they don't want to hear other people don't believe because it challenges them. They want to be supported and supported in their mission.
There's another military concept called the will of the people, and I was wondering if you would just explain to our viewers, what is the will of the people and why is it crucial?
The will of the people becomes very important because you cannot fight a war. Historians and experts on the military, one of them is Sun Tzu from China and Clausewitz from Germany, who years and years ago wrote that no matter how strong you are as a soldier, as a warring faction, you will not win unless you have the will of your people behind you. And that's what happened in Vietnam. That's why we declined to achieve victory in the end in Vietnam, because of the will of the people turned. And I have a fear now in the global war on terrorism that through various activities, the enemy is trying to manipulate us into having our will decline. Think back to September 11th. And I know you probably know where you are, and the viewers probably remember where they were. I remember the terror in my patients' faces and my staff that day, and I'll never forget it. I don't want to forget it because they want to bring us down, they want to bring us harm. And it includes 4 continents where they're spread out to. It goes all over the world. It is global. And we cannot let our will suffer. We have to. That's why I'm happy to represent the veterans today, because those veterans understand. They've been there. They've had that experience.
Well said. You mentioned the Vietnam era, and you were serving stateside during the Vietnam era, and I was wondering if you were talking about how public opinion kind of soured during that time, and do you have any anecdotes from that era to just illustrate that?
Yes, I do. I have some not real fond memories. I have some fond memories. I ran a medical holding detachment. I was a commander of a medical holding detachment as a young officer, in addition to some other duties. But the men at that time, there weren't too many women had come back, and they were wounded in combat, etc., and they were getting their lives together while they were healing up in the hospital where I was working. And it was interesting because they would call home, they would go home, I would give them a pass, and they'd go home for 3 or 4 days or a week, and they'd come back and they'd say, I just want to stay here, because the reception that they received at home wasn't always good. Not from their family members, but from the people in the community.
Public, yeah.
They called them baby killers and things like that. These guys were very traumatized by that. I have an incident where I went to pick up my fiance, my wife that I eventually married, Ann, and at the Washington, D.C. airport, our national airport. And I was leaving, and my boss said, where are you going? I said, sir, I told you this morning I was going to go down and pick up Ann. And he said, oh yeah, that's right, but you're not going in uniform, are you? And I said, yes sir, I am. I mean, I was a young officer, very proud to be serving our nation. He said, you can't go to D.C. airport in your uniform. I said, why not, sir? He said, too many anti-war people down there, and you'll cause a ruckus. You're not, unless you're on official business down there as an MP guarding something, you can't go in uniform. And I thought, wow, our nation's capital, I can't go in a uniform? What is wrong? There's something wrong there. Fortunately, when I was at Fort Bragg, I traveled through D.C., and there were people shaking hands with people coming back and going to Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. I was very, very happy to see that. Some soldiers told me some incidents at the Dallas airport where they received a standing ovation from people. Very good.
Wow.
That's a lot different than the Vietnam era. And those poor Vietnam vets came back and they were maligned through the movies and in the media and everything else, and all they were doing was serving their country.
You touched on some of the good things that can come out of serving the military, the standing ovation that happened recently. Just from your perspective or from any other perspective, such as the troops, I wonder if you'd just share with our viewers, what are some of the good things that can come out of serving in the military to balance out all the negativity that you sometimes hear?
I don't think we have enough time in this interview to cover that, to tell you the truth, but I'll try to be as brief as I can. One of the things that I see is the educational opportunity and the discipline and the change in the lives of so many soldiers that I came in contact with. I have stories that are endless, but one of the best stories is a young enlisted soldier that ended up becoming my first sergeant. And he retired from the Army. Being in an educational environment here, you'll appreciate this. And he went back to school, got his bachelor's degree at night while he was on active duty and doing all things that soldiers do. He got his master's degree and now is a principal in Kansas.
Wow.
And he's a coach and a principal and is just, and if you talk to the old first sergeant and you say, what do you owe this to? He say, I owe it to the United States military. It straightened out my life. And if I've heard that once, I've heard it thousands of times. I talked to a young public health nurse who just got back from Afghanistan. And she was all excited. And I said, oh, you're going back to El Paso? And she said, well, I'm excited, sir, because I just got word I'm going back to Afghanistan. And I said, you're excited about that? She said, there's so much public health work in El Paso that I can't even talk about it. But she said, there's so much more in Afghanistan. I've never felt so fulfilled. Fulfillment is a big opportunity in the service. You're doing a mission that's so important. My son sent an email on, ironically, September 10th of this past year, and he said it was about a half hour before midnight, and he said he just got a mission, and he wanted to send my wife and I, before he went out, he was practicing his operations order because they were going outside the wire, which means they're out of secure area and going out into combat area. And he said he couldn't be prouder in all his life to be serving his country. And he realized that it was September 11th that he was doing that. It was 4 years later. And,
wow.
And you know, these accomplishments that these soldiers are able to obtain. One of the things that we like to think in the service is that when we have a young man or a young woman and they come to us in the service, when they leave, hopefully they take back to society a much better human being, a human being with more discipline, with more education, and who can really impact on society in a positive way.
Excellent. Well, you know, there may be some high school students watching this program, college students, and I was wondering if you would take us through, you know, when you were in high school and college and how you got started in the Army, perhaps to share any pointers to help them along the way if they're interested in serving.
I think that Dr. Kerr and the Armstrong School District does a good job about bringing recruiters into the school and making access, and fortunately, in a show like this, letting me come and represent the veterans.
Definitely.
The opportunity is there going through recruiters if they choose that route. If they go to college, there's a reserve officer training program, which I was a graduate of, where you take military courses. They have Naval, ROTC, Air, all services have this at many universities. Another opportunity is to go through the National Guard at the state level, which, as you know right now, and most people do, is now serving in Iraq as not just as a state, but as a national armed forces. Pennsylvania and all other National Guards are serving there, so that's one avenue. And I think what I would encourage each and every one of the young people to do is find some vets, talk to them about their experiences, talk to them about how it changed their lives, and what kind of impact it has. I always get great comments from patients who look around my office and say, gee, I guess you were a military man and I was in such and such. In fact, I met a gentleman just a few minutes ago who was an air defense artillery officer, and he shared his comments in the impact in his life of, you should have him on here, he'd probably be a better interview.
Oh.
To tell you the truth.
Believe me, you're an eloquent spokesman for the entire U.S. military. So,
Thank you.
is there anything else you'd like to share just about veterans or Veterans Day as we close?
I would, and I'd like to say this to all veterans and their families. I'd personally like to thank them on behalf of my family and on behalf of America. I'm proud to wear the uniform again today to represent you. Hopefully I have represented you somewhat in a favorable fashion. I know you represent yourselves much better than I ever could, but all the sacrifices that the veterans who have served and those that are serving now and their families, I always say if you see these heroes, these patriots of America, share your thanks with them. They deserve it. In fact, every time I think of patriots, I think back of the Revolutionary War, and I have to stop myself and say, you know what? There are patriots right here in Katanning. You know, the Bill Bellises and the Nick Kiefers and the two Guthrie boys, and it goes on and on and on, and Adam Burketti, and I could just talk all day about all these young students who are just like these gentlemen here before us today who are now serving in the global war on terrorism. And we have a couple of, 4 of them in Iraq right now. David Harkleroad and Eric Smith. My son Jim that we talked about and Dave Jordan are over there. Just Scotty Hazlitt, and I just say thanks to all those families. I pray for them every day, and I thank the Lord that we have great heroes like that, and I encourage all you young people out there to think about service to country because we need patriots. If we don't have patriots, we won't have an America. It's as simple as that. That's not a complex problem, that's a simple problem. We don't have a draft today. In fact, the number of people serving in our armed forces is under 1% of the population. That's not very high in a country as large as we are. And I think you should look at that. You don't have to serve for 24 years like I did. It could be 2 years, 3 years, or whatever you can give. It's an important facet of America if America will survive.
Excellent. Wow. Well, I have to just thank you for the captivating program that you presented today. On behalf
It's my
of
honor to be here. Thank you.
On behalf of the school board administration, thank you so much for coming here, Colonel Nemec. That's our show for today. I hope you had a good time, Dr. Nemec. I would also like to invite all of our viewers to please join us again next week for another look at the Armstrong School District. For more information about what's going on in the district, please visit the district's website. And remember, be sure to thank a veteran for their service, not just on Veterans Day, but throughout the entire year. Take care and have a great week.
Hello, I'm Dawn Manna from Alderton High School, and this is what's happening around the school district. Armstrong School District students and teachers did a lot to learn about Veterans Day in November 2005. At Lenape Elementary Schools, 3 major activities happened. In early November, at least 2 fathers of Lenape Elementary first grade students returned home from serving in Iraq. These soldiers, Mike Bell and Aaron Thompson, shared stories and photos from Iraq with students in Juliet Rumbarger's and Brian Kovalowski's classrooms. First grade students welcomed Mr. Bell and Mr. Thompson with a patriotic song when they came to visit Lenape Elementary School. Teacher Dawn Zella-Froh placed the famous poem, Flanders Field, on the wall outside her classroom. Her students colored large poppies and put them all around the wall with a banner that read, "We Remember." Teacher Pamela Bowser assigned her English class students to ask 10 questions of a veteran. The students gave a class report on what their veteran had to say. At Forward City High School, students in Jamie Fry's English 8 class studied patriotic literature, listened to patriotic songs, and wrote a letter of appreciation to a soldier. All day November 9th, 2 soldiers who served in Iraq spoke to students and showed them a short video. At Shannock Valley Elementary School, students wrote letters to U.S. service members in Iraq. Some of the letters were read during an assembly on November 10th. It was especially powerful because one of the teachers at Shannock Valley Elementary School, teacher Donna Shaw, has a son serving in Iraq. At Dayton Elementary School, students did a month-long build-up to Veterans Day by researching with their families any family member or close acquaintance who has served or is serving our country. Students will display their stories at the school's Fall Festival on November 4th. At the Fall Festival, students sold blue and gold stars for $1 apiece to display in the school lobby to honor living and deceased servicemen and women. All proceeds benefited the local American Legion.